Hi, welcome to Essential IT and Security Skills. I'm Charles Redmond, Master Trader, here to guide you through the essentials that you are going to need to land the job that you are looking for. In this series, we're going to talk about essential PC skills. I'm going to walk you through everything from software to hardware. Most people know me as a cybersecurity expert. Well, I couldn't have gotten there without learning the basics first. That's what this series is going to do. And then we'll move on in some later series with some more advanced concepts and techniques. But remember, it all starts with the basics. It starts right here, the essential PC skills. I'll explain how hard drives work, identify and explain the PATA and SATA hard drive interfaces, identify and explain SCSI hard drive interfaces, describe how to protect data with RAID implementation, how to install hard drives, how to configure your CMOS and install the drivers, and troubleshoot hard drive installation. So how do these hard drives work? Most traditional hard disk drives, or HDDs, are composed of individual disks or platters. Those platters are made up of aluminum and coated with a magnetic medium. You have two tiny read-write heads to service each platter. Here's a look at a traditional hard drive. You see the individual platters, and you see the little arm there connected to a servo that moves the read-write heads. The closer the read-write heads are to the platter, the more densely the data can be packed onto the drives. You'll have your choice of hard drive speeds ranging from 3,500 RPM all the way up to 15,000. Here's a closer look at the read-write heads. You'll notice one to read the top of the platter and a second to read the bottom. So basically, hard drives store data in tiny magnetic fields called fluxes. The flux switches back and forth through a process called flux reversal. Hard drives read these flux reversals at a very high speed when accessing or writing data. Fluxes in one direction are read as zeros, and in the other, read as 1. Most hard drives use one of two encoding methods, either run length limited, or RLL, or partial response maximum likelihood, PRML. With run length limited, data is stored using runs that are unique patterns of ones and zeros. With PRML, it uses a powerful intelligent circuitry to analyze each flux reversal. With PRML, there's a significant increase in how much the hard drive can hold, or its capacity, up to 1 terabyte. So earlier I showed you the servo that moves the read-write heads. That's connected to a stepper motor. The stepper motor technology and the Verse coil technology are used for moving the head actuator. However, you usually only see these in floppy drives today. The Voice coil technology uses a permanent magnet surrounding the coil on the head actuator to move the arm. This is more how modern hard drives work today. So how do you locate all this data? Well, it's based on the geometry of the disk. The geometry is used to determine the location of the data on the hard drive. It used to be fairly critical to know the disk geometry because you had to manually enter it into the CMOS settings. However, today's geometry is stored on the hard drive, so the BIOS can query the hard drive for the geometry data, and you no longer have to enter it manually. So remember, for every platter, you have to have a read-write head. And you have to have 2 heads per platter, one at the top and one at the bottom. Most hard drives will have an extra head or two for their own usage, so the number may not always be even. When saving data to your hard drive, it's stored in concentric circles on the platter. We call those tracks. Groups of tracks of the same diameter going completely through the drive are called cylinders. So now that we know what the cylinders are, we need to break it all up into sectors. It's the number of slices in the hard drive. For instance, 512 bytes of storage are saved per sector. An older, more obsolete form of hard drive geometry, you might see write pre-compensation cylinders. It's the specific cylinder from where the drive would start writing data farther apart. Internal sectors physically smaller and external sectors physically larger. You might also find landing zones. Basically, it's an unused cylinder that's used as a parking place for the heads. It's referred to as the L zone or LZ. However, the landing zone is really only needed for older drives that still use stepper motors, like floppy drives. So earlier I told you you're going to have a range of speeds that your hard drive can run in, from 3,500 all the way up to 15,000 RPMs. The faster the drive, the better the performance. However, faster rotation speeds also produce more heat, so you need to make sure you have the proper airflow and cooling inside the case. Now let's talk about solid-state drives. A solid-state drive, or you'll see it depicted as SSD, has no moving parts. It's extremely fast. However, in comparison to the old platter hard drives, they are quite a bit more expensive. You'll find solid-state technology in hard drives and memory cards. We also use flash-based SSDs, like your flash drive. They use very low power, so there's very low heat generation, and they're very fast because there's no moving parts. However, you see in comparison the old platter hard drives about 10 cents per gigabyte, whereas solid-state drives can be as much as $3.50 per gigabyte. Next, we'll take a look at parallel and serial ATAs. The ATA interface is the dominant interface in today's marketplace, starting with the parallel ATA and then migrating to the more modern serial ATA. The A+ certification expects you to know and understand the various ATA interfaces and the maximum data storage size of each. Here's a chart to help you keep it straight. So starting with the ATA-1, it used a 40-pin ribbon cable. It allowed for 2 drives, 1 master and 1 slave, and used direct memory access, or DMA. However, it only had a maximum capacity of 504 megabytes. Here's a look at an early ATA physical connection. You see the 40-pin connector, and then the jumpers directly next to it, right there, little white jumper in the middle, and then the power connector. The ATA-2, you'll see this referred to as EIDE, increased the maximum size up to 8.2 gigabytes. It also added the ATAPI interface, which means now you could use a CD drive. And data transfer speeds increased to 16.6 megabytes. Next, you have the ATA-3. The only real addition to the ATA-3 was now you had the capability of self-monitoring analysis and reporting technology, or SMART. With the advent of SMART, now users, through free diagnostic tools from the drive maker, could analyze issues and problems going on with each individual hard drive installed. Next, ATA-4. With ATA-4, it introduced Ultra DMA modes. Do you remember what DMA stands for? Very good. Direct Memory Access. Mode 0, 16.7 megabytes, all the way up to Mode 2 with speeds as fast as 33 megabytes. So with hard drives getting bigger and bigger, there was a need for interface extensions. The AT1 standard, for example, actually was written for hard drives up to 137 gigabytes. However, because of the BIOS of the day, it was limited to 104 megs due to the cylinder, head, and sector maximums. The interface extensions extended BIOS commands, enabling drives up to 137 gigabytes. Next, we have ATA-5. ATA-5 introduced 2 more modes of DMA, up to just over 66 megabytes. It used a 40-pin cable, but had 80 wires. And they were color-coded so that you knew which drive was doing what function. The blue connector would go to the controller, the gray connector go to the slave drive, and the black connector to your master drive. With ATA6, it increased the maximum supported size up to 144 petabytes. That's 144 million gigabytes. And it brought with it an additional DMA mode, Mode 5, which allowed for access speeds of 100 megabytes. And next, ATA 7. With ATA 7, it introduced the serial ATA, which increased the overall throughput to 150 megabytes all the way up to 300. So this increased need for speed, if you will, brought the inevitable end of the PATA format, mainly because it used wide, flat cables that impeded the airflow. And remember, the faster the drive, the more airflow that was required. There you have it. It's pretty simple. Remember, everything starts with the basics. Once you have these understood, everything gets a whole lot easier. If you have any questions or even just a comment, feel free to leave them below, and I do read each and every one of them. I'll see you next time.